Tonight's guest, Jeff Wong, is one of my favorite people. And I think we have a lot of fun talking about this. He tells us how much should we really worry about big O notation and when we should pay attention to it. How he's experienced in his various types of roles, from agency work to consulting to product work, some of the interesting things that happen in location-based analytics. I think it's a really fun chat that I hope you enjoy.
All right.
How's it going?
Everything's good. How is everything with you?
Oh, really great, really great. I'm really enjoying doing this podcast thing. So it's kind of nice to see you. I think the first two have gone okay, and literally it was Arthur who said, "You know who I'd really like you to interview?" He said, "I really want to hear from Jeff Wong." And so I fired. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, very loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Okay, that's good. So just right off the start, something that I want to try on this one is I would like to get your YouTube thumbnail face, which is to say, I don't know if you've been on that might be it right there. But as you know, what we try and do on YouTube thumbnails is make them as clickbaity as possible, and so just something like, or like, yeah, that's good, or like quizzical, or give me like a couple of YouTube faces. Awesome. Okay, cut and print. I can turn those frames into a something in the thumbnail, so you're looking good. So right off the start, again, like I reminded Arthur, is that this is an interview. The whole thing is going to be live, except things will be cut out. So some of the things that I would cut out are, if you refer to specific people by name, like we want to keep it generic. We're not pointing finger,
Yeah. Like I've read your document, so I know
Yeah.
what needs to be done. Yes.
Okay. So let's then just start where I really like to start, is where we tell me about sort of your first memories of technology. Where did you get your first start?
So, as I recall, when I was grade 8, that's when I first got my computer.
Yeah.
And from then on, like I recall very vividly that I was trying to get a game to work, and so I was starting to, back then it was running like DOS and whatever, and so I was making changes to the auto-execute.bat file and like the config files and so on, trying to see how I can do anything to make the memory as big as possible so that I can play certain games. And that was like, obviously with the first computer in place in my hands, that's when I first kind of like got introduced to starting to play with computers, starting doing things like that. And then I recall my parents actually got a contact that, so I've been taking kind of like, I think I've taken like about 8 to 10 lessons of QBasic programming.
Okay. So so you said grade 8, and so I think the age for that is about 10 or 11, maybe 12 even.
14.
14. Okay.
14, 13, 14, roughly.
13, 14. And was this, if I recall, you were born in Hong Kong, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And was this still in Hong Kong, or were you in Canada?
No, I was already here.
You were already here in Canada. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've started out, you were trying to make video. Do you remember which video game it was?
There was aliens involved, but otherwise, it's one of those like point and click adventure.
Okay.
But I don't recall the exact name for it. But I just know that like I only have 4 megs of memory. Back then it was kind of the standard. And I think recommendation was like you need 8 megs of RAM. But then if you do something with like the extended memory or something like that, then you are able to play it. So I was trying to fiddle around with it. And what happened was I messed it up completely such that my computer doesn't even start up. So I need to get somebody to actually, like the person that sold me the machine, like it was one of my mom's friend, who actually back then was like doing his side business of building machines and whatnot. So he actually came over and was like, oh, so I see that you're trying to do this and do that. And it was like, yeah, so then he helped me figure it out. And then I was able to play the games afterward and so on.
Oh, but, right. So, I mean, if it was a point and click adventure, maybe like, I'm wondering if it was like, was Commander Keen sort of one of those? Anyways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But, and then you're doing QBasic, you're in high school at some point going through this stuff. And how much more programming did you do throughout your high school process there?
So since grade 10, they started making computer science courses available in the high school. So from grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, OAC, I actually took computer courses throughout all those years. And been doing like participating in various programming contests as well. Like there's a lot of programming involved. So I've done like Turing, Pascal, what else they use? I don't think they use C yet. I think it's just Turing and Pascal throughout the high school year.
Through the high school stuff. And then and OAC, for anybody who is watching internationally, is like a college qualification year. So right there, so you knew right away that you were just all in on going to university for programming.
Yeah, pretty much since getting the first computer, I was very interested in in computer stuff, and then having more exposure during grade 10 with computer programming, like I've just basically set my course, set my direction to becoming a programmer.
Right. Okay. And if I recall, you went to University of Toronto, right?
Waterloo.
Waterloo. Okay. So tell me about the university experience. What did you get from that as a whole, and what kinds of things did you learn from that?
Well, I think for academically, like I think all the schools are fairly similar. What makes Waterloo stand apart is their co-op program. So we get basically we get 8 semester or terms, like a 4-month terms, where we get to go and work for companies as a student. And so we get a lot of exposure in learning new technologies, learning how real life environment works, how real development works, and so on. And throughout those few co-op terms, I actually did several applications that are for banks that are supposed to be like production, like used in like a production setting. So with being a student, having that type of exposure definitely gives you a lot of like there's a lot of interest. First of all, like you're doing something that people are going to be using, and then just giving you that opportunity. I think it drives a lot of interest and things like that going forward. So so definitely
So your co-op terms were you were doing Canadian banks. Did you do any of the sort of big engineering firms like IBM or Google or Facebook or anything like that, or was it just mostly banks?
So I've done 3 terms with a Canadian bank. I've done 1 term with a Canadian cell phone company, or mobile network company. I've done another term with a school.
Yeah.
And then what else? I'm just trying to recall. Oh, actually, it is 6 working terms, not 8. Is it? Yeah, 6 working terms.
Okay.
6 working terms.
Okay. Right. And but
That's been so long ago.
yeah. Well, of course, of course. Now you're in university still, and you are working on things that are being released to frontline customers. Like in theory, in the stuff you're doing in this space, I could hop on to my banking website or app, and you were contributing directly to production bits on that.
Yeah. So, like for example, on one of the work term, I was actually a QA engineer
Yeah.
working for the online banking website.
Okay.
So anybody like that, it's actually like their online banking website that like anybody would access. And then another term, I was actually doing a development, like an application for the bank's high profile investment application. Like it will basically, it will pull their profile. It will see like, you know, the list of investments that they have and so on and so forth. So yeah, those are like all being used in the field.
Okay. And what technologies are you working in at that time?
It was .NET.
Okay.
It was
just .NET across the board.
It was Visual Basic .NET.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting. How does because you, I know, moved later on into working with the C# .NET framework. How do you feel that the two compare in working with one versus the other?
I think that like the main differences is that well, first of all, the experience that like I didn't do the application from the startup, so it was already kind of like it has something in place, and I was adding additional parts to it and so on. So there's no experience on setting up a project from the startup, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the learning curve a lot easier.
Yes.
Like we're just building out parts, and I can take code examples from other parts of the application, so that you know, that then I can make the part function the way that I need. Whereas the C# project, because we're doing things from the beginning, so there is no existing app, there's nothing existing. So I need to learn not only how to do C# code, I need to learn how to build a C# project, how to start everything, making connections to the database, how to deploy an application to make it work, how the configuration files needs to be set up so that it will point to different environments and so on and so forth. So there's a lot more that needed to be learned versus the Visual Basic.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of my first experiences, of course, as well, where somebody else had done all of the work, and it was just this running system, and I came in effectively as a legacy programmer, just maintaining this thing. So, you know, they need a new comma on line 37 of the output report, right? And it's just like, and it could take you 2 days to find out how to put that comma into the right place.
Right.
But that's, so it really does, as we move through our careers, we take on larger and larger chunks of that foundational work of setting up the framework. So the other programmers who come and support us, like we supported them, are learning from within a working system. And so it really is this, I guess I would call that scaffolded learning, where there's, you know, anyways. So I think that's, so let's say, was there anything really interesting? I mean, we've gone through your co-op, I guess, at a high level and a quick level, but Was there anything really interesting in, say, your thesis or your, I guess, your capstone project at the end of your?
No, I think everybody is kind of like doing very similar, like near the end. So there's not really, like, I mean, from my own experience, from a school standpoint, like I would say I definitely learned a lot more throughout the co-op terms,
Right.
in terms of something that I can bring into my workplace right now and so on. There's a lot more to it. Like, I mean, you learn the theories, you learn the basics of programming and everything. The kind of like your foundation in university, and there's obviously there's like a lot of math, like as you know, like computer science in Waterloo is it's part of the math faculty, so we do a lot of math as well. And I mean, a lot of that I probably don't even recall how to do anymore. Like if you ask me now how to do like linear approximation, I can say, oh, I think I remember what the formula looks like, but I have no idea what.
Like you could take it out of a police lineup if they had like five equations up against the wall. You could be. I think that one. It's that one. But yeah, I get it.
So I think one of the thing is like if you don't continually do that type of things, like you eventually will lose it, right? Whereas like ever since graduating from university, I've been doing kind of like programming jobs. So in terms of like the programming side of things, like the foundation of programming itself, then that's kind of like stay intact. But a lot of the stuff that I learned from university, I would say that's already come and gone.
Yeah, I do remember. I remember one time where I was either just before or just I was trying to get. This is probably about 5 years ago. I was just trying to get ready for an Amazon whiteboard interview, and I was racking my brain trying to figure out how to do the big O notation, because that's what they say. They say if you're going to do one of these whiteboard interviews for one of the big guys, they like every question is a big O notation question. They go, what's the big O of this? And I tried to corner you, and you just, oh, that was university. I don't care about that anymore. You need it in school and you need it for interviews, and then anyway.
That was actually like how one of my interview went. Like after university, I remember going into an interview with another big Canadian bank. And it was supposed to be a programming job, but all the questions that I was asked is all maths. So he didn't ask me to write a single line of code. He didn't ask me anything about databases, anything data related or structure related. Everything is how would you solve this mathematical question, things like that.
Interesting.
So I found out afterward, because I actually have a friend that works under him at that time, and I found out afterward that yes, because he is a math major, so he's very interested in people that knows math.
Right.
But this is for development, so it's
But let's take a second and talk a little bit more about Big O, which again, for anybody who's watching, I did not go to university past like second or third. I got my psychology degree, I got my education BA, but I didn't finish any 4-year program. I got about 2 years into computer science, where I haven't actually done a deep dive into Big O, although I have repeatedly tried to learn it. So how often, when you're writing your code, do you have those sorts of complexity analysis in mind? And what do you shoot for when you're trying to build your loops? Where, how much attention do you pay to putting a loop within a loop and things like that?
I would say nowadays, with the computing power and most of the applications that's running out there, a lot of people tend to not take this as a higher priority, or with any priority at all. And most of the people are more focusing on the accuracy of the outcome instead of the optimization portion.
Right.
The only time that we'll really look at it is when an application is just very slow on the individual part, and then you start digging and trying to see what makes something really, really slow. And then you start looking at, oh, there's actually a bunch of loops here, and you're just doing things all over and over again. Why do we have even multiple loops looping through the same data? Why can't you just do all of those in the same loop, for example? Then that way, things will get speed up. But in terms of like actually applying the big O notation, I think a lot of times, like, I don't think that's an exact mindset that a lot of people have. It's more just like basically just seeing how you would go through the data in the least amount of ways and trying to get things done. So I think a lot of people kind of like just envision that in their head and just say, okay, this is going to be faster than that. Code base, and so it's not like calculating the big O notation, but as you do more and more, and as you write more and more codes, I think it's kind of like comes in as an
instinct.
Instinct, yes.
Instinct, right.
Yeah, that this code is definitely going to run faster than that code.
Right. So if we were going to boil that down to sort of a decision rule, your number one rule is make it work. Yes. And then your rule number two is optimize for performance. If performance is bad, optimize for performance. And then really, you're programming from your feelings because it's just such a low level thought about try and do it efficiently, but just make it work first of all. And okay.
Yeah, and I think the one of the biggest point is that because the technologies that we use nowadays, for example, like the databases, they're already optimized. Like if you make the query do majority of your work, then you're already pretty much set, and you don't have to look through the data as much. So you can kind of like let that technology drives majority of the optimization for you. So so in that case, like most of the applications that you're doing is just looking through the data set that is provided. I mean, you cannot really optimize looping through it once.
Okay. So here we are. Let's pick this up again. You're back. You've just finished university and you're out looking for your first job. Were you straight to one of the banks or did you go somewhere else?
So after my co-op terms, I actually spoke to my manager to see if they were interested in hiring full-time employees. But unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot of perks with the Canada system on hiring co-ops, right? So they want to stick with hiring co-ops to do that bit of work. So there wasn't actually any openings or opportunities available. So after I graduated, I actually didn't land a developer job until 8 months later.
Oh, wow. Okay.
8 months after I graduated. Yes.
Right. So is this, now I know, one thing I know about you is that you frequently take on, I don't know if you're doing it now, but while we were working together, you would take on short, quick side projects for a couple of bucks. Is this where you started that habit of doing like a weekend WordPress or?
Actually, like, I mean, that came, I would say I didn't specifically look for any of those opportunities. They're usually just like, word of mouth or friends who needed something that needs to be done. So I just do it for them.
Yeah.
Like I never really gone out and try to bid for a particular project or try to ask for any contracting work or anything like
Okay.
that. So no, so I mean even right now I don't try to do any of those. So anything that comes, it's always reached out by other people that I've worked either in the past or friends that knows that I'm capable in this space and just needed some help and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's yeah.
How do you, okay. We're gonna get back to that 8 months after graduation, you found your job, but a question I have arising from this sort of work for hire stuff is, how do you go about deciding to price yourself and price your time? How do you decide, and how much do you charge? What do you decide?
It really, this is a very interesting question. I think first of all, like the very base of my estimate would be how much I'm currently making right now.
Okay.
So anything, with my base salary divided in an hourly rate,
Okay.
I would definitely work at least 1.5 to 2 times that amount. That would be my base cost for anything that I'm introduced to for a contracting job.
Okay. So if you're on $100,000 a year,
mm-hmm.
that's roughly $50 an hour.
Yep.
And so what you would say is, just to make it worth your while when you're pricing yourself for one of these side gigs, when you've got a full-time job, you say it's got to be from $75 to $100 an hour, or it's not even worth your time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then I assume you listen to what they say about the thing that they're asking you to do. You try and ballpark the amount of time that it will take you to do it. And do you give them a quote based on, so if you think this project, it'll take you 10 hours, do you say, 10 times my base rate, and then?
Yeah, so I mean, again, like, because most of the tasks that I took on was not really like an official contract or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I've never really created a contract or tell them that this is the amount of time that I'll take or whatever. But most of the projects that I've been doing for friends, for example, and then I will spec it out. I'll try to figure out the amount of hours that I will need, and I just multiply it with the bit with whatever I want to charge. And then I'll just give them like a flat rate. So it will just be like, okay, you want this particular website build, it'll be like $500 or something like that. Yeah. So it would be like if it took more, like obviously because I'm doing it for a friend. So if they are, if they have additional requests, if they have, things that they would like to change and so on, and it took longer time, I'm not going to be going back and say, okay, I need to charge you these extra hours, because it's not like I'm not trying to make money off of.
You're trying to help a friend.
Exactly.
At a fair and reasonable exchange. Yeah.
Exactly. But there are contracts that I've taken up before where I was actually it was a person that I used to work with, and they moved to a new company and they needed some help on building a particular functions for a website. So they asked me how much I would charge, and I told them, like, basically, because I don't know what the details of the project at that time. I just told them like how much I would charge on an hourly basis. And then once they give me the details, I told them that I'm going to need at least this amount of time. And then anything that comes and changes and that needs extra, then I bill accordingly after that. Yeah. So there are some there have been opportunities where I had to charge more than what I've asked for, because obviously they make changes, they make requests, and I had to work with basically the developers to try to come up with the solutions that will work, things like that. So different situations ask for different things.
Right. Okay. Okay, so it's 8 months after graduation. You get your first job. Where are we?
Oh, so actually, I mean, I did have a job during that 8 months. It's
Oh,
just
okay.
that
What were you doing then? It was not a programming job.
it was not a programming job.
Okay.
It was just like very simple data entry. So
Okay.
I was just trying to get some money so that I can, I can spend it on food and whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I like throughout that period of time, while I was doing the data entry work, like I submitted a lot of applications, but as very similar to the situation now, like as a fresh grad, a lot of times, they're looking for people like junior position with 5 years experience, things like that. I'm pretty sure you've heard of all of those. But yeah, like very similar. So it was very difficult to find a placement after graduation, especially like if you didn't get one from kind of like the school co-op program and as a continuation, it makes it a lot more difficult.
Right.
Obviously, for people who are like if they graduate with like like high honor like dean's list and whatever, like there will be companies who are looking for you. I unfortunately I'm not one of those people.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. So I would say yeah, like I've thrown out a lot of resumes and whatnot, but a lot of times, I've interviewed and there was no feedback, no replies.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have much. I would say I didn't have much working experience right off graduation.
Right.
But yeah, like one of my friend was actually working at this agency, which is like they're like a digital agency, and and one of the developer just left, and so there was this opening, and then he just recommended me, and it's a very, I would say it was because they're not really a technical like a development shop, so their requirement was actually a lot like their expectation was a lot lower. So I remember like I went in the morning for an interview, and they asked me to once you get home send us a couple of your programming experiences, things that you have done even on the side or whatever to so that they can take a look. And then I was driving home, and they're already like, oh, so yeah, we decided to give you an offer.
Okay, well, that's not bad.
Yeah, so I mean obviously like the pay then actually was not really something to be proud about. In fact,
so
I would say
what year is that we're roughly talking about then?
04.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I'm going to ballpark, first programmer salary in Toronto in 2004, which is you are probably between $40,000 and $55,000 to start.
It's under.
Under that? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So
yes. I mean, given that I didn't have any experiences, and I didn't have an actual job going at that point. So that's not? Something. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I've actually learned a lot from that company, both in the development space as well as in the politics space. I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, like I took on that job even though it is very, very underpaid. But yeah, like I mean, that's how I actually got started. That's how I can continue on as a coder, as a developer.
Yeah. Okay. So you just said something that I thought was interesting. I mean, the coding is interesting, but tell me about the office politics space. Why was that something that you wanted to, like, what sorts of things are going on in that space?
So one of the I mean, I'm trying to word it so that, I
Yes, this
don't
is an
mention
interview. This
anything.
will be online. This will be on the internet. Do not name anybody. Do not shame anybody. But you can
Yeah.
say a person was doing this. You just can't say that it
Yes.
was me.
So I
It
think
wasn't.
I mean, being in an agency space,
Yeah.
one thing is, how you would communicate with the client. And because they're all kind of like contracting jobs from the clients given to you, like you kind of like build a digital profile for the customer. And so, there's contracts that are written on like, what you're going to be delivering and so on. But at the same time, more often than desired, there would be promises apparently over the phone with these customers that the developers are not aware of. And so on the delivery date, we're now hit with like, why are X, Y, and Z missing? And we're like, what are these requirements? We've never even heard of them before.
Yeah.
And so, then, we started to have to like, oh, because we promised the customer doing these type of things. And so, we started working overnight and overtime to try to get that thing to work, try to fit things in. And then at the same time, the people that promises these things leaves at 5.
Yeah.
And so, you're thinking to yourself, why am I staying at work? Why am I trying to, work myself off just so that they're not in trouble, right?
That's
So
right.
there's like a lot of these politics going on, things like that.
Right. Okay. Okay. And probably a bit of resentment around, because a bit of resentment around that too, right? Because these other, the sales team are sort of saying whatever it takes to make the sale, and they're peeling a strip off of your back to achieve this thing.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that get commissions.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes there's like a chain, right? There's a lineup.
Yeah.
Like, the sales, their managers, their managers, and so on. And sometimes like that promise comes out from someone fairly high up. And so, it's not the exact sales or the project manager's fault, but somebody else's who actually promises. But at the same time, like I mean, I wouldn't say everyone that I've worked with are kind of like, belonging in this category. There's obviously some people who takes more ownership on these type of projects, even if it gone wrong and gone into a different direction. And and I think one of the thing is that we tend to see who actually cares more about the project, who actually cares about the people that they're working with. And for example, like working late nights, there would be project managers who stayed behind, who would make sure that we get at least food, to go through the evening and so on. And there's people who are just like, see ya.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's different type of people that you work with.
Sure. But at the very least, you got huge additional bonuses in your salary from all the overtime you worked.
Nope.
No, I know. I had to say it, but
no. In fact,
no.
I do recall that there was one instance where I worked over 30 hours straight after a project, and then I recall I wanted to take the next day off, and I couldn't.
Oh, okay. So tell me about that. Must have been roughly the time you started looking for your next job.
Yeah, around that time, yes.
Yeah.
But actually, no. Like I think one. I would say I am one of those that tends to not move from place to place as much.
Yeah.
I know there are people that move very, very often, but I tend to, stay put, as much as I can. And back then, the reason why, like, I actually left the place was because I got reached out. I got reached out by another company.
Yeah.
So usually, I would, I would have a chat with them and just see, how things goes. And then they gave me a number that
Yeah.
the current company couldn't match, basically.
Right.
And so, then that's when usually I would I would talk to my manager. I would talk to whoever is in charge with, the salary portion and just see if there's anything that could be done. And then, unfortunately, that's when I moved.
That's
Yeah.
when, okay. So that's an interesting thing to me. You, how often do you, because on LinkedIn, both of us are developers. We're both programmers. Pretty good experience, pretty good profile. You get messages probably every single day, if not multiple times. How often do you ignore them, and how often do you respond and say, "Oh, tell me a little bit more"? And are there things that you watch out for that make you say, this one I'm going to reply to, this one I'm not going to reply to? What are the things around that recruitment process?
So definitely, people who just like randomly show up and send me an invite without any words or anything like that. That's a no. I usually decline any of those requests. Anybody who actually sends me a generic message is like, send me your resume for whatever, like these opportunities. Those are all definitely, like if you reached out and you cannot send any like a personalized message to me, then I'm not even going to bother talking to you.
Right.
So those are the very base criteria. And then, in terms of somebody who sends me like, a more personalized message, with a bit of introductions on what type of work, how, and a little bit more details on that. Usually, even if I'm not interested, I would reply saying, these are not the technologies that I'm looking for, and that's usually the ones that like that's how I would base my decision. Like if they're asking me, for example, to do Java work right now, I would probably say no.
Right. Well, not to engage in a religious holy war, but I think that's always a good answer. I think for myself, one of the things that I think is really important is having the actual number of the salary range that they're interested in hiring for. And so one of the things that I said to myself a while ago was, if they include a salary range in the opening message, I will respond to them 100% of the time, even if it is to say thank you, but no thank you. And I think the reason for that is that salary data is so important. And so if a recruiter is out there trying to get feedback, that's what I would say is the number one. And they reach out, they reach out with this really interesting and engaging sounding opportunity. If you go through all of the steps and all of the dance around, oh, will they, won't they, are we gonna dance? What are we gonna do? And at the end of all of that effort, they say, oh, but we want to pay you $20,000 less than you're on right now to do it. You think, oh my God, what a chump am I for going through this whole thing? So I think that's it. I think that's it for me personally, is if the number is there, I will always do them the courtesy of responding. But if it's an interesting sounding offer or interesting sounding role, I will say, listen, that sounds great. I'd love to talk to you, but what's the budget for the role? So I don't go through 4 days of interviews and conversations on the other end to say, oh, but it's like 5,000 less than what you're on right now. And I think, oh, That was a waste of time. So anyways, you're at the first agency, you got that number from the recruiter comes in, and ballpark, can you ballpark the percentage increase? Was it like 20-30% for your next jump?
33.
33. Okay. So, and is this next role another agency, or is it?
It is they're a consulting firm. So it's
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. I remember you telling me about consulting and that. So tell me about the experience. What is it like? In fact, I have some, anyways, I have a video that I plan on doing about my disdain for a recent experience with a consulting firm. But tell me about, rather than poison the well, tell me about your experience in consulting and what was this like?
I mean, I would say different types of jobs are more fitted for different individuals, and I tried to to make myself because one of the things about being a consultant is that the pay is very well. And you rarely would have overtime, long hours, and you get a very good work-life balance, right?
Oh, really?
Yes. Well, from that particular experience, at least.
Okay.
I mean, because you're a consulting firm, you go into your customer and you're doing any type of work there. You're kind of like said, okay, you're doing an 8-hour work today, you're doing an 8-hour work tomorrow, and so on. And really, like if you plan it out correctly, there's really the case where you would be like, okay, I need to fit 30 hours of work into a 20-hour time frame.
Right.
Because you've already said, okay, these are going to take X amount of work. You kind of like add an additional multiplier so that you will never need to run out of time.
Right.
Basically. So, I would say that couple of years when I was doing the consulting, I have a lot of free time outside of work.
Oh, well, that sounds pretty nice, actually.
Every day is 9 to 5. You go in, you go out, and you don't have to worry about any work related after work.
Wow. Okay. And what is the nature of the engagement that you're doing? So what do you go in, you sit down, but what do you do in that time? What sorts of problems are you solving? And I'm just going to assume that we're still in the .NET world, right?
No.
Oh, okay. So there's
so this was a period of time where I actually was doing business intelligence, and it was mainly doing KPI reports for companies. And so basically what they would be doing, like they would buy the software and we'll set it up, we'll connect to their data sources, and then we'll build these reports around their data so that they can see.
So is that like Crystal reports or
it is
SAP?
IBM Cognos.
Okay.
Yes. So basically, my main role in that was to build out. There are times where I build out like some ETL lines of jobs, and to transform the data so that we can put it into a report and pull different data sources and so on. So that after that, the reporting structure, there's a little bit of programming involved, like where you need to inject like JavaScripts here and there, so that your reports are not just a flat report but interactive in some way. So so that's pretty much like you would go into like how you start out is you would go into a customer, you would first do an analysis of their data and then just see what type of transformation of those data is required, how long it will take, and then to build the reports after those, how many reports are there, how long everything would take, and then you give them the kind of like the estimation of how many hours of work is required, and then you carry out that job basically.
And then you carry it out. And I mean, it sounds effectively like rather than programming specifically, you are configuring commercial off-the-shelf software for Fortune 500s.
Yeah, so there is some programming involved where you have to write database scripts to transform the data, but mostly they're like the database side stuff.
Okay.
So SQL queries, a lot of queries, basically. Yes.
Yeah, and so now, if I understand this correctly, you're working a 9 to 5. You are being paid very handsomely for your time. It's not challenging is kind of like a double-edged sword. It's kind of, well, anyway, so what is it at this time in your life? You did this for a couple of years, maybe. What is it that gives you the push to start saying, I'm going to go somewhere else?
So one of my buddy from high school started a company, and they were looking for developers.
Yes.
And originally I wasn't even thinking of like he didn't word it in such a way that he was trying to poach me to join his company. But he said he needed a bit of code around a specific functionalities, like very similar to what I do normally. So they needed something that will help them to run some modifications to images in the scripts. So then I wrote the piece of code to them, and then afterward he just reached out, we really like the stuff that you did and would like to know if you're willing to jump ship.
If you want to jump ship. And this was a high school friend, and you were like, okay, I've got this thing that pays really well, but maybe it's a little boring from time to time. I'm not really excited by this. And over on this side, I could be hanging out with my buddy, having a good time. And was the salary similar? Did you have to take a slight cut to go to
the salary? I would say it really depends. For consulting, there is, I think that for consulting, the base salary is not very high, but there was a lot of bonuses attached to it. So when you go, like the way that they work is that when you go out and you go to a customer, you work and that for example, you charge them like $1,000 for the day, you actually get a cut from that $1,000. So you take like a 3%, 5% cut from that, and that would be your bonus for that one day. So you can see that if you have a lot of work lined up, each day combined together, you can get a lot of bonuses. There are companies who pays like $2,400, $3,000 for a day of job or a day of work. So those bonuses rack up pretty nicely. So I would say, on a given month where I have a lot of work lined up that are fairly, very high, then it would be a pay cut. But overall, it would almost be the same pay.
Okay. So that's interesting. And so you move, you're working with your friend. What are the technologies that you get into there? And can you say anything about what the business model was of what they were actually building at this time? So
so that was actually the first introduction to Python for me. So they already have something in place that basically it is a backend system that drives a corporate mobile application. Basically, they have all of the retail data, and so they built a mobile application on top of that, and we were actually handling the delivery of those data throughout an API, basically.
Right.
And so yeah, so that was my first introduction to Python, my first introduction to Mongo and NoSQL actually.
Yeah.
And they use Postgres as well. And what else? I remember that they were using Flask. Yes, back then they were using Flask, which is a framework in Python. A very micro framework in Python.
Yeah.
And so the nature is that they would usually like at the beginning they would they actually do a lot of like they try to get kind of jobs from different companies, different larger companies, and build out custom solutions for them. So this was actually one of their custom solutions needed. And then while I was working there, the company kind of like started moving into a different directions. They wanted to build something in-house. And so we started building an application that can do indoor tracking.
Oh,
so
okay.
Indoor analytics. So basically, based on over-the-air information that we can grab hold of, we can then kind of like triangulate a person within a internal area and see where they.
Do you mean like you're detecting the Bluetooth on their cell phone?
Possibly. I mean, that is one way. Like, think of it. I don't know if you're familiar with like the Meraki router. So
I don't know that one, but
yeah. So what basically is, and a lot of companies actually use that right now. So if they offer any free Wi-Fi's or anything like that, so they actually have like different hotspots, right? And then based on the signal strength of those hotspots, they can triangulate your position within their area.
That's amazing. And that's everywhere. And they're doing that right now.
Yes.
Everyone, everywhere you go, there is a free Wi-Fi provided by somebody. And whether you sign on to the Wi-Fi or not, they're tracking your IMEI number, aren't they?
As long as you have your Wi-Fi turned on,
right? Okay.
Because you would be doing probing to different things, and with that information, you can actually do all sorts of things.
Holy shit, Jeff! That's Minority Report. Like this is some high-end, like that's some wild stuff. My mind is blown. Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's like there's actually multiple companies that do this sort of things. So they would provide you with these routers that you put into your area, your public area. Offering free hotspots and whatnot, free Wi-Fi, and so I think at that point, and I don't know if there's any differences now, but that is actually an area like a very gray area where there's no. These information, these wireless information is not considered private information because you're not linking anybody to an individual.
Right.
So you don't actually know who this person is. You can never link it back into who the individual is.
Well, I mean, unless you write down a hash of their IMEI and then sort of like.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a way to.
Like you said, gray. It's
yes.
There's no legislation around this.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, like we hashed out the IMEI, so we never know who our target is. So, but I mean, we don't know who that person is. We do know an individual traveled this path inside an area. So then we can create kind of like these statistics report for retailers or for
user stories.
Exactly. Yeah, and then like these are your hotspots. These places nobody actually visits. So do something about it, basically.
So with that analytic data, a retailer could put their high value items right in this high value pathway, and so it's like there's just this path of profit that people wander around through the store in. I mean, it's amazing. It's also, I think, the kind of thing that is like, because if you're hashing somebody's phone ID and their phone ID shows up here, all of a sudden, if that same hash shows up in a different location that you have your data, you could track one user across multiple locations. And anyways, so you're doing this. This is really like cool and mind-blowing to me. So excuse me as I stammer.
Yeah, so I mean, to make the long story short, this sounds good on paper.
Yeah.
However, I think with the Canadian space, like there's a trend of slow movement on new technologies. So it sounds great. There's nothing that's
there was no uptake.
There's nothing proven that these analytics actually benefits you in any way. Like, I mean, like, to just know the hotspot of an area, you can literally just hire somebody to stand there and they can tell you that, oh, this area, there's like a lot more people than the other area.
Sure.
So,
okay.
So,
yeah.
There's not really, I guess, in a way, like, we weren't able to prove how effective, how much benefits a company can utilize these analytics data for.
Right. Okay. So as cool and mind-blowing as this sounds to me, they had a failure in the sales side to paint the story of how cool this is. And and like you said, this low-tech solution of just hire a college kid to sit there for a day and say, people go there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think not just the sales part, but just being in the Canadian space pays a very large portion of why it was a failure. Yeah. So I think if we were in, like, I recall very vividly that there were multiple talks with potential U.S. customers, for example, that were very interested in the technologies, but because we weren't a U.S. company, then things, the talk kind of like didn't go exactly. Yeah. Like, we went through an incubation program, we went through a startup program, and there's a lot of buzz, a lot of encouragement, saying how this could become the next thing.
Well, if you think about what Disneyland would do, they probably have that. I mean, somebody probably invented this for Disney, but this is the kind of thing. There's a difference between someone as large as Disney, who wants to have those graphed out heat maps of where people go, versus an outlet of the gap where it is a very clear and small space. So so whoever's doing that in the US is probably killing it. They're probably doing very well. So was the reason that you left because they never got some real traction, or what? How do we move out of wherever you are here?
So, I mean, the company eventually ran out of funding, and there were actually talks with investors, but they never landed, or there was not really a good collaboration with any of the investors that they were talking to. So eventually, we never took on any investors, and we ran out of internal funds. So the company just, decided to close. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it must have been easier finding the next job after that one, though. Like, this was.
Oh yeah, but I mean, by that time, I've already had a lot of experiences. And having worked in the development field for quite a while definitely helps. And getting more comfortable with the interview process definitely helps too.
Yeah, yeah. So where did you end up next? Is this where we met?
Yes.
Yeah, we should both show up at Click. And what were the first projects sort of, I mean, obviously don't name the clients, don't name, you know, but what types of projects were you working on there?
So it was, I believe, as I recall, the reason why I was hired back then was there was like the previous developer actually left, and so they needed somebody who had PHP experience, and they needed a backend developer strictly on PHP
Right.
stuff. So, and having worked extensively with PHP, I actually did my interview, did my technical test in PHP, and so
Right.
They hired me, and that's when I started working for Click.
Okay. And I can't remember. Were you there were you there for a full 5 years or
just under?
Just under
4 years, 3 months.
4 years, 3 months. And so, tell me about this. So we're back in agency land. You start with one PHP project that you're working with. How does your growth trajectory go in that time? So, you know, what's the work life like for you along there?
I think it's started out pretty well. Like I think the first few months when I was working there, I was only managing really only one particular client and one particular project, and so we were very we were very in control of when the deliveries will happen, what type of enhancements that we're building, and there was a very good relationship with the client as well. So then if there was any pushback on things that they want, and we know that it will take for example for like a couple months of work in order to get particular things in, we would usually like be very open about it. We'll tell them these are probably not the things that you're looking for, and there may be other ways to help you to get to land on better spots. And so I think with that, there's a lot of we were very in control, and so there was not like a lot of overtime. Like everything was, you come in, you do the work, and you're pretty much, that's it.
Yeah. Well, I happen to know that doesn't ever last. So, so I guess, I mean, if I'm going to summarize the way it goes from there, you are showing competence with this one client, and there are other clients that are sort of, there's smoke starting to rise around the edges because you're sitting in this sort of sea of calm, and things start flaring up, and people start asking you to help out just a little here and there. And what types of things do you start getting into along those lines? So how is that developing, and what technologies are you getting into? How many projects start coming at you?
So I think like for the first year or so, like things has been pretty much in control and pretty calm. I mean, there's a couple of projects where we have to work late nights as well. As I take in more and more different clients, different projects, then there are more works that are being lined up, and then I have to start juggling time between the different customers, when I should be doing this, when I should be doing that. And the way that Click works is the project managers will book your time, and so you're supposed to be dedicating the time that's booked for the particular project. But that's the best case scenarios. But there's always fire that comes up, and you'll start have to juggling your time, and then you have to be taken off of the project and start working on other stuff because
Yeah.
things are burning over there, or
Yeah.
things like that. There's always those type of issues. And so the more customers, the more projects that I start to take on, then the more of that type of thing starts to happen.
Right. So can you start to lose control a little because it's you're no longer in a space where you can focus on one thing. You've got, you can't put 100% of your attention on one thing. You've got to put 50% of your attention on 4 different things, which if you're the one who went to the math school, what's that add up to, right? Like, if you only have 200% attention, you're going to do fine. But so so after a year, you're into year 2 and you're running what, 4 clients now? And
I mean, I don't remember the number, but there are, as I recall, even for one client, at one point they have like 5 or 6 projects going.
Okay.
For one client, and so along with the existing projects that I'm doing now, I'm kind of like in charge of the backend system for like 5 or 6 different projects.
Right.
And yeah, that you started losing, definitely, like as you said, you start losing the control. All of the projects are kind of like, okay, we need all of these being delivered within a week's worth of time. So
right.
Yeah, so everything is due within that week. So now you start to juggle how much time you can spend on one thing versus the other. Yeah.
Right. And I guess one of the other things is if you have 4 projects delivering on the same day, these are 4 people have to realize, who are paying attention to this, that this is 4 entirely separate code repositories where it could be 5 different programming languages, right? Like it's and so it isn't just the code delivery itself, it's the context switching from one to another. You've got to look at the code in this space and say, what was going on here? And so that leads me to a question about this, because the rest of the 4 years carried on like that pretty much as well. Maybe going from 5 to 10 or things like that. Something like that. It just ramped up. So what techniques do you adopt to minimize the cost of the context switching, and how do you get that chaos under control when you have to spin 4 or 5 different plates at the same time?
Yeah, I think one of the skills that I would say is a must-have is a good communication with the people that you're working with, especially with the project managers. They're the one that are kind of like driving when things needs to be delivered. And so, so when you're doing context switching constantly, that puts a lot of pressure on yourself. Like there's even going from one project to another that is the same language, the entire structure, the entire context is already very different. And so you still have to try to recall what you were doing in here versus what the differences on that. I think as we were moving into more and more team members, we start standardizing some of these structures so that the most of the project, we started creating boilerplates. So hopefully the projects can utilize a very similar base together. So then we kind of like already have a lot of the context on what and where things are within the code, and how it could break potentially. Like you kind of like already know the inside out of your structure, and so it makes that context changing a lot easier. But yeah, as I was saying, like, the communication is definitely very, very important.
Yeah.
If there's anything that is going to be a risk, it is much better to let the rest of the team knows ahead of time and
Right.
saying that this is a potential risk than actually, when you hit it and it's already almost in the on the delivery time frame, and then now you're starting to kind of like scatter and see, how you can fix things.
Right. So you raise your hand as soon as you see something that has the slightest chance of being a problem. You say,
Exactly.
You as a senior or lead programmer, what you are trying to do is watch the delivery timeline and see as far. It's almost like driving a car, right? They say, look as far as your eyes can possibly see in order to know what's coming down the road. And that's kind of what we do as lead programmers, is we look as far as we can see and start steering the car as soon as we see a problem. And so that's one of the ways that we avoid these terrible explosions that can happen on delivery day.
And also,
go on.
like, you're not only looking vertically straight, right? You also have to look horizontally. There are other people who are also driving cars, and they might not be telling other people that there's a roadblock in front of them.
Right.
And so you have to make sure that all of the cars can arrive at the same time.
That's the same, right? So if you and I, as people who are very much more focused on back end, start to see the front end team are struggling with things, and maybe they're a little newer in their career, maybe they're a little shyer, maybe they don't have what it takes. It's actually part of our responsibility to ensure that we speak up on their behalf to make sure that we bring the rest of the team with us. This has turned into a wonderful analogy. I like it.
Yeah, like it's no longer like, when you're a junior developer, you're kind of just like focusing on your own work, and at the end of the day, you just call it done, and you don't really need to worry about the rest of the application or the rest of the team, whether or not they can finish, or you just make sure that whatever is assigned to you is complete, or complete to your best ability. But as you become more senior, then you have to start looking out for other team members who are who it doesn't even matter if they're junior or senior. Like, you just have to look out for the entire team regardless of their position. If you see something, flag it.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Was there anything else that was really interesting? I know that near the end of your time with Click, you started getting into the Adobe Experience Manager work. Was there anything that you really particularly enjoyed from a technology perspective there? Was it, and why was it .NET, quite honestly? That's all. but no, I mean, but more seriously, what are the real highlights of your time there? Because you did so much, you touched so many languages. Did you have any of the VR work?
Yeah, touched some bits and made modifications, not a project from start to finish now.
Right. In fact, I remember one time I was on vacation and they needed an edit or a build or something. And like, I was so out of it that I didn't want to speak to anybody, but this stuff comes to me. I said, get Jeff on the phone. I'll walk him through it. And so we went through, just you and I wouldn't talk to anyone else, like I'm Donna Summer or something, the disco queen. But listen, just give me 20 minutes with Jeff, and in 20 minutes, you had checked out the code, you had installed Unity, you had built this thing out to an iOS device, and I was back on my vacation in no time. And it was just like, I don't know what it was. I said, okay, Jeff, you just do this. You do this, you do this, you do this. And you're like, yep, 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 yep. And bam. So, I mean, that's one of my favorite. I mean, I was going to save this for the introduction, because I do the interview, then I do an introduction that talks about what we talked about, and then I do an outro. And one of the things I kept thinking that I was going to say in the intro was that you are at least one of my top 3 developers that I've ever worked with in terms of anything. So I've got to say that you're fantastic. I think you're amazing. But back to the question, what are the highlights? What are the best things that you worked with from a technology perspective in your time at Click?
So I haven't, before joining Click, I've never touched C#.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously, learning C# was I would say one of the most technically challenged thing that I did at Click. And after learning that, I started going into the mobile world as well. So I started looking at Xamarin and
yes.
Yes. So I actually built out a few POC apps within Xamarin after that. So definitely enjoyed learning and working with C# since learning that from Click.
Right. Okay. So that would be the thing. And then near the end, I believe I recall what happened was that recruiter call came in and there was a number quoted, and how much higher was the number? And not in, as a percentage. It was just, it was the next step up, right?
Yeah, it's quite significant, I would say. It's higher than 10%.
Higher than 10.
Yeah, closer to 15 most.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That's pretty big. And what are you doing, or what is the business of the new place? And
so
what are you working in?
So where I am now, we're actually in a space that's called conversation intelligence.
Okay.
And so what we do is these sales calls that the main idea is that for any sales teams, when they're making either a phone call or a Zoom call, Hangouts, and so on, all of these kind of get lost after the call. So what we do is we record the call, we transcribe the call, and then we do analysis on the calls.
Right.
And we provide a lot of analytical feedbacks that are hopefully allows any sales team as well as their managers to do coaching, to act on it, and to do reminders, things like that, that will allow them to get kind of business benefits on knowing what type of conversations that they've had with their clients.
Right. So, and a large part, I mean, the transcription is artificial intelligence.
Yes.
The data analysis is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, and the theory is that if you, and I think either you or somebody else was saying that you can generate checklists of action items out of the calls, or is that still a feature that's on its way?
No, there is definitely we would be able to provide some insights on what you can act upon or things that or for example one item would be engaging questions that you've asked or next steps that you provided so that a particular call contains that information. And it will tag it in such a way that you can go into the exact snippet of time where those questions was asked.
Right. So if we're talking back about your first job in programming, that first agency where somebody's on the phone and makes a promise, and the AI says, you know, let's rip this promise out and put it onto a checklist and tell the developers that somebody is going rogue. And so all of a sudden, if we're talking about looking as far as you can see down the road, your SOW or your promises are being tracked in real time. And I mean, either at least you know to start building them right away, or somebody goes back to the client and says, hey, remember that time that I promised to do this thing that was super expensive and impossible? You've either got to pay for it or not do it, right? And so I mean, the story of what this is doing from a business perspective is really sounds exciting to me. And I think that is just, you know, the people who buy into that and who buy that for their sales teams are just going to have the next level edge in terms of delivering. And there was another thing, I think I saw the stats once where they have a measure of how much time your guest was talking versus how much time you were talking. And you get graphs and everything. And it's just so cool. And so, but you're not doing the AI there. There is a different team who does the AI.
Yeah. There's actually a research team that publish papers and do patents with these type of things, and you know, they actually have their transcribing models. They work with universities that have been doing kind of like going into these sort of fields, and we actually own quite a lot of patents related to
the IP. Fields. Yeah, so you're not just an application selling to businesses. Your intellectual property, which you could license to, you know, you could license it to Azure, AWS, and IBM, and all of that. So that's really interesting as well. Sounds like it's pretty cool. What are you doing for them, and what is that technology like?
So this is a Python shop.
Yeah.
And so my main focus of work is to build functionalities around the front-facing application, driving like any of the REST APIs that will drive any data that will show the client. So, for example, I've built some of the analytics portion, gathering data, making the data available for the chartings and so on. Some integrations in, that will deal with third-party APIs, grabbing external data or things like that, feeding into our system. So that's just some of the things that I've been doing.
Okay. And what are you learning about in terms of the Python work, or what are the new skills that you think that you're picking up in this space? What are the things that I should look at that you have found that is really cool in the time since you've moved to this role?
I think one very interesting thing is learning about the security aspect of the data that's being traveled along. Right now, because we're working so closely with the data, we need to make sure that how we're handling the data, especially when you're integrating with third-party APIs. There's authentication keys involved. How we're storing them, how we're able to access them. All of those things we need to make sure it's in a safe environment such that not anybody can just put their hands on. And also anybody who has even the access to the database would not be able to get access to some of those
so keys. The field level information is encrypted as well. And that makes a lot of sense, because if we're talking about protecting against the world of corporate espionage, having full recordings of all conversations is something that you want to watch out for. And so you have a real incentive to make sure that that stuff is locked down tight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of that, where do you want to get to? I guess because we're at present day, and what are the things that you want to learn in the next 6 months, in the next 2 years, and what do you want to be doing? Well, let's just talk about that, and maybe after we'll talk about 5 years out.
So I think right now, what I really want to get more knowledge on is everything that has to do with Elasticsearch.
Right. Okay.
So we've been doing a lot of work with Elasticsearch, and so I'm not talking about like querying the Elasticsearch. I'm talking about architecturing the server itself.
Yeah.
How we can make sure handling terabytes of data without the system going down. How we can run large queries that's optimized. Yeah, things like that. I think that's something that I'm looking into right now.
Okay. Well, make sure you remember me when Google poaches you after this. So, but now my understanding is Elasticsearch, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Elasticsearch is not an Amazon product, but Amazon offers an Elasticsearch service. So if I think about the major players in search, we've got Lucene, I think the Apache Lucene. There is SOLR, if I'm correct. Is that correct? And
yeah,
then and Elasticsearch is a third one. And I don't know if there are others, right? Am I correct in that understanding?
I think Elasticsearch is based off of Lucene as well.
Okay.
So, and I think, I don't recall exactly, I mean, I've read up on Solar, but I think they're all based off somewhere, like Lucene was like kind of like the first one that started out, and then everything else that came afterward are either based off of Lucene or loosely based off of it. Right. And so I think what I mean I don't know what the like which ones are bigger player, which one has more market share, but they all have their own benefits. They all have their own downfalls, and so it's just a matter of choosing, which side you bite the dust, basically.
Right. Okay. Because I remember I wrote something and it used the Lucene.net wrapper, and so if I was to say, would I be able to help Jeff? I would say, you are saying that if I had a little bit of knowledge of the Lucene stuff, which is open source, the Apache Lucene is open source, it's available, you can go out and play with it tonight for free. You would at least have a foundational understanding of how to work with the other two, because they all seem to have grown out in the same direction. Is that fair, or is it different enough that you should jump straight to Elasticsearch? Or
it is fairly different. I think the underlying technology on how the data is being stored, they are fairly similar. But then the way to, for example, the way to query the items would be very, very different. The way to store the items would also possibly be very different. Like for Elasticsearch, for example, they're all kind of like, I think they're all document based. So each document, then you start creating indexes on these documents, things that are more pertain to how you want to run your application. But then writing these queries would be very, 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 very different from application to application. I wouldn't say there's going to be a smaller learning curve. So if you know one and then you're go into the other, I think they're different enough that you would do things very differently from one to another. But like as I recall, the way that you wrote the Lucene.net application, you're kind of like you're generating the documents and then you feed them like all within the code. I believe it's just a JSON document, right? That you put in, or
so I had. I'm trying to remember exactly. I know I was indexing either Word documents or PDFs. And I would say scan the folder to build the index once, and then I would run the query against that index I built. I mean, the one thing for anybody who does not know working with search is it is not like queries are not SQL in this stuff. I found it pretty complicated, probably because I expected if I'm going to query something, it'd be simple, like select star from this, and it is not like that. But I don't think it was JSON that it created. I think it was.
It's just a list of words, and then it kind of like gets indexed somehow. I think that's. So I think there's like different ways that you can generate these documents and see how like you store it. And the way that Elasticsearch works well is that you have these documents that you can create indexes on, like very much like a document where, like in Mongo or in NoSQL, where it's it's like a JSON document, so it doesn't have to be particularly structured. It can be any type of structures you want. So you don't necessarily have to have a set of keys or values or whatever. And you can also create indexes on specific keys, so that you can say, okay, these keys are going to be of integer type or string type, keyword type, things like that. And then it will index it in such a way that you can do different type of search on top of those keys fairly easily. And it allows the flexibility of a loosely search as well, so that you can not even type in the text correctly. Like it could be having like a few spelling mistakes, and it will kind of like find you the best match of
the sound alike. They run an analysis on the sound that the word you're typing is, and they sort of I thought that was really exciting. That's effectively the functionality where Google says, did you mean this? Okay, and if I'm to understand your index type, for example, that would be what you would use to say, integer type. That would be, you would add filter, search for this string of text, and then you say, but make sure that it's a time code related thing or so.
So I think like, for example, like a keyword type would be a text type, then, then they would do like a loosely string search against, like you said, like sounds or different mechanism to see if the words is more matching to what you're assuming wanting to search, versus if it's like integer type, then you start maybe like indexing IDs or things like that. Those obviously are not going to be loosely searchable. It's going to be exact. Or like date time formats, it needs to be within a time range. All those are not loosely searchable as well. So different types of fields would grant you different type of searches as well.
Different types of searches. Okay. So here we are now. You've learned search. Now we're saying in the future, what do you do for ongoing professional development? Do you write weekend code? Do you play around, like how much time do you spend playing with programming versus playing with your two beautiful children, right? Like, so which
I would say right now it would be good if I can get maybe 4 hours a week of personal time into, like a side fun projects.
yeah,
I'm still very interested in doing mobile development. So I
yeah,
still try to, make sure that I keep my hands on building Xamarin projects.
yeah,
And just trying to see what I can build, maybe something for my own Android device and try to rack
yeah,
it or whatever.
yeah. Sorry,
Uh,
I was just about to say, have you been watching Maui, what is it, multiple application UI or Microsoft application UI, or
no,
it's
I have
the new cross-platform run it everywhere UI from Microsoft.
no, I have not taken a look at that yet.
That's okay. It's not actually out yet. They're still in the building phases.
Mhm.
So you are aware that Uber, for example, is planning on doubling their footprint in Toronto. I think they're hoping to
I've
hire.
I've I've gotten a few notification on that as well
Yeah,
as reach out. Yes.
yeah. So I mean, if you like mobile now, but I was talking to them. They put on a tech talk, and one of the questions I had was, why are you doing two native apps versus a single shared code base? And they're absolutely not Xamarin. They are not React Native. They are native and native. I think they're Swift and whatever Android is written in nowadays. I mean, it's at its core, it's Java, but it's some sort of fancy name Java, right? So,
I don't know. I mean, I've
yeah,
done I've done a native Android app once,
yeah,
and that was it. I mean, I don't like I only recall like starting in the Eclipse application. They already have like templates that is like, oh,
yeah,
you're building an Android app, and it just from there, yeah.
yeah. So you were roughly Hello World on Android, but
Yes.
so and you're doing this Xamarin stuff maybe a few hours a week just to keep interested. You're developing the skills in your day job around the search stuff, which is pretty, I mean, it's pretty interesting. It was really complex, and there was so much to learn when I did that, low level intro project. Um, I guess that's a lot. Do you have anything else that you're interested in, or?
I mean, with the lockdown and pandemics that's
Yeah,
happening, obviously I want to spend more time with the children.
yeah,
Making sure that they at least have time, to walk the neighborhood, to go out
yeah,
and have some fun, not just
yeah,
stuck inside indoor all the
yeah,
time. So,
yeah.
definitely trying to have a little bit more of a balance with the family time there.
With family time, I think one of the things for me with my son is I feel really bad that I don't have the opportunity for him to play with other kids his age, right? So it's like there's all of that social interaction that is really exclusively on me and my wife, right?
Mm.
And so, you know, you can't have another 2-year-old over and let them just sort of like beep 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 back and forth. You've got to be the second 2-year-old in the room. And I mean, I love that time. I love that time, but I certainly understand how it takes away from, things like starting a podcast or, but I wouldn't change time with my son for anything. That's why we do these late at night. So,
Mm.
if somebody wanted to hear more about the things you're doing, to get into some technical conversations with you, would you be willing to hang around and check out the YouTube comments if they show up, or is there any way that somebody who wanted to talk more to you could reach out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I mean, if you want, you can also put like my LinkedIn profile there. I've actually get like if it's not like a spam message
Yeah.
relating to like job offers, I usually reply. Like even for example, like there are people who reached out on LinkedIn with me and it's like, oh, I've heard about you worked in previous company here or you're working in this company right now and I would like to, just get your thoughts. And I'm usually very open and fairly easy to reach out in that way, and I will reply majority of the times on those
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make sure I put that in the description so people can find you. And I think I'm satisfied that we've done a pretty good call here. And so thank you so very much. And
Oh no, the pleasure's mine. It's always great just having a chat with you and just
yeah,
having fun together.
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna let you go and start editing. Oh, this is exciting. Tomorrow night, and now I know I said I can't name anybody unless they've done the pod, but tomorrow night I have an interview scheduled with Daniil.
Oh, nice.
So, and what's really exciting about his work is he's gone from, well, we'll find out everything, but where he is right now is he is a lead instructor at a boot camp. And so there's just so much to learn from somebody who is teaching other programmers, because from my time as a teacher, you learn as much or more from your students than the thing you teach them. And so I'm really looking forward to that. I think that one's going to be really exciting as well. So
yeah, I would definitely be looking forward to see that interview as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it, Jeff. We will talk to you again soon. And thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So that's Jeff. I think it is probably clear from that interview why specifically he is one of my favorite people to work with. Just a wonderful, wonderful person, a lot of fun to talk to, and I'm so happy that I had that opportunity to catch up with him. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be speaking with Daniil Molodkov, who is a lead educator and instructor with a boot camp program called Brain Station. They have a web development diploma program that he is a leader on. And I think there is just going to be so much that we can learn from a quite strong developer when I worked with him to somebody who now sees an incredible range of new and learning developers, and there are just going to be so many tips that we're going to be able to pick up from him in terms of what he sees as the factors that create strong developers. It's just going to be great. I'm so excited for tomorrow night. I'm really happy about tonight, and I hope you come back. Thank you very much.